Here we are again, Mike, and you've had this miserable period, sort of post going abroad after the national, and suddenly work doesn't seem to be there that much. Although you do some quite unusual stuff with BA air stewards, and um, and you talked about depression, which was really interesting. About how when you were 27, you had that sense of and the out of body experience, which is extraordinary. But you decided to take any work that came along, and so suddenly you're offered the Cambridge Theatre, which is a touring company.
Yeah.
And you just started talking about that in our last chat. Just elaborate a little bit more about it now.
Well, Cambridge Theatre Company had been very successful. The previous artistic director had been very successful with him, Bill, name gone again, and it sort of mainly did English classics. It was nice sets, good productions. I think actually at one point he even did Back to Methuselah, which was quite adventurous because that's a huge, show play. So it wasn't exclusively the obvious things. But when I took it over in 1990, unfortunately there had been a sort of depression financially. And that audience didn't automatically come back. I wasn't very much aware of the sort of economy of the time, but and I started off thinking, okay, here's this company, we're touring, and I remember writing a very long piece for my board suggesting how we could go about things. And it was very innovative and it was full of energy, saying, look, nobody really likes to tour. So we've got to make it very interesting, both for the people who are touring and for the theatres who have to cope with a new show every week and so forth. And it'd be very nice if we could offer those theatres some workshops or talks and so forth. And I laid out a whole lot of very nice ideas, about repertoire. And it was all very positive and they were all rather impressed, and so was I with what I'd written. And I didn't realise the sort of people I was going to be in touch with who were running those theatres. They didn't want their lives complicated by all this extra stuff. They just wanted basically a well-known writer. It's got to be Ayckbourn or it's Tom Stoppard or it's Shakespeare or it's and preferably a sort of name from the telly, and nice sets and not too long. And I tried to do that the first year. Now, the first year was complicated because I was already committed to going back to China and to do another production in Heidelberg. And so I did two of the productions, the first two productions, Lady Windermere's Fan and Country Wife, back to back. I did them as a pair with the same cast. And two other directors did the other two, who I thought were good, Arms and a Man and Twelfth Night. And I think my shows did all right, but the other two didn't do at all well, and the audiences weren't very good, and nothing was very exciting. And I brought my two shows into London and to the Lillian Bayliss, and they were perfectly good, but they weren't exciting. I thought The Country Wife I had a nice idea for, and the actors were very good, and they were all right, okay. And the way the Cambridge Theatre Company was set up, it was very strange. It was mainly funded by the Arts Council, but to a certain degree by Cambridge City. And we always did a production of the Arts. Is it the Cambridge Arts? I think that's the main theatre. And because they gave us a bit of money, they felt very proprietary, and they wanted more for their money. They didn't want to give you more slots, but I don't know, they wanted your presence there. But and we had an office. We didn't have any rehearsal rooms, so we had to rehearse in London anyway. And I was traveling up and down. There was some tacky flat somewhere that was for the artistic director. It was so disgusting. I never spent a night there. So I was traveling up and down a lot. And I don't know, the whole setup wasn't very comfortable. And they were going to, I can't remember the details now, I'm guessing totally. Um, they were going to cut some of their contribution to our funding. And there came a point when it seemed, what's the point of being up in Cambridge? We're not getting very much. They won't give you 2 weeks run there. They won't do this, but they want, and they want a bit of education. They want a bit of this. I really can't remember the details now. And there was a lot of, city politics. And again, I'm very bad at it. I didn't go in thinking, oh, I must deal with this and I must find out. I just sort of hope they like me and my reputation and my integrity and my lovely productions, you see. But very naive again. And but I did have a wonderful general manager, James Williams. I mean, divine man. He had been a stage manager, a production manager, and he knew every aspect. He was quite young, every aspect of getting a show on. He supported me totally all the way through to a certain point. Just wonderful. So he was my savior in ways, and I felt very good with him. Really nice. So that was a lovely plus. And it was a small staff, sitting up in their offices up in Cambridge. But there was a point when it seemed that Cambridge was sort of just dragging us down or stifling us. And with the surprising agreement of the Arts Council, we abandoned our Cambridge funding, changed the name of the company, and were London-based. Which, that was after about the first 3 years. And with that, James and I found a wonderful space very near the Young Vic, which was a rehearsal room with offices, and we did it beautifully. It's a lovely green room. There were showers, and we even had another little building which we could rent out. So it was a really lucky place. It had been a little sort of storage factory, just set slightly off the road, just on. It's called just off the cut, where the Young Vic. So we actually had our own home, which I was dreaming of, with a really nice rehearsal room with a sprung floor and good lighting. And, so I had lovely conditions. And with much agony and trying to find a new name, I called the company Method and Madness. There's much method in his madness. And Plato says, all arts are this madness in the art and so forth. Which, to start with, wasn't a very attractive name for a lot of people and didn't seem appropriate for my work. It wasn't mad enough. Anyway, so it went through 2 stages. And yes, I did some very nice workmanlike, good productions. They didn't all come into London. I did a very nice production of The Revenger's Tragedy. It's one of the only shows I've ever moved out of its period. I turned it into a sort of New York mafia in the 1940s, because I suddenly thought, the way the guys are talking, and they're talking like the Duke, the iambic pentameters are perfect for that sort of. You want to do a such and such case, you ought to go and do, and often with Americans, Shakespeare sounds much more natural, the rhythms. So I thought, why not? And it's the Duke, and it's, so I did it, and it worked wonderfully, except for the last scene, which I could never find any logical, sort of, what you call it, sort of version of, modern version of.
Well, because was there a lot of killing going on in the
A lot
last?
of killing, which wouldn't have been impossible, but it was also a sort of a theatrical performance at court, mask, and the whole thing was crazy. One of the characters has a vision in the middle of it and sees it, and I was stuck in a nightclub with one of those spinning discs, and everybody was dressed up with Groucho masks, justify whatever the equivalent was. And I'd always wanted to do that play, but Trevor Nunn had done a brilliant, brilliant production of it years ago when he was early on in at the RSC. It was fast and witty, and I thought, for years I thought, what's the point of doing it? Because he's done it. It really is absolutely fantastic. But anyway, I did do it, and it was all right. And but the wonderful thing that happened during this period is Philip Osment, who'd been an actor who'd worked with me a few times with shared experience, started writing plays. And we entered on the most wonderful collaboration, which has been one of the real highlights of my career, personally and professionally, because we got on so well. We never had a row. We understood each other artistically, and I don't know, it was just one of those lovely, lovely things that happened. And he was a wonderful, clever writer, and I did 6 projects with him. I did 4 new plays, and then we did a couple of things outside the company. But as I had my own company, I could commission him, which was wonderful, you see. Mm-hmm. And he wrote for the actors I had for that particular season. It was really, really lovely. And so that was a big, big plus. And he won a couple of awards, which was very nice. And I won awards for, best production, touring productions of the year. Or I did a show, a season of 3 plays. I had 4 actors for a year, and we did 3 plays. And they were very good. I did an adaptation of Jude the Obscure with 4 actors. I did Private Lives with 4 actors, and Philip wrote a play for them. And it was good work. But nothing ever caught on the way it had before. We went to the Lyric Hammersmith, and, we'd have reasonable houses and okay houses. And the reviews were, some of them were very good and very nice, but they never sort of took off, and I was never mentioned much. Do you know what I mean? I could feel a great difference between the heyday of shared experience. Although the work was good, and Philip's plays, I swear those productions were very, very good, and the acting was terrific for all sorts of reasons one can discuss, And he's really the only playwright I've really seriously collaborated with. I did collaborate with a wonderful, wonderful writer in Israel called Hanoch Levine. He offered me 1 play to do, and it was great. But I've done very little new work, but with Philip, it was terrific, and I feel so lucky I experienced that. So there were lots of very nice things about it, having my own space to work in, having your own rehearsal room, having good conditions for the actors, which they appreciated. And then I was always trying to find a way of breaking patterns, because with the Arts Council, you can get on a treadmill. What are you going to do this year? You've got to tour so many weeks. You've got to go here. This is your budget, and you think, and you're grinding your way around the country, more or less the same venues, and they're taking you because you're one of the people they take, but they don't show so much enthusiasm, and they're all right. Some are nicer, some are not, but it wasn't stimulating in the good old days of shared experience when you went to those wonderful fringe venues and studio theatres and arts theatres where they were all excited to have you there, and it was like this new wave of theatre was happening at that time. So it was a very different world, and it wasn't joyful. But I guess I should have left it much earlier than I did. But I think what was I, in my late 50s? Yeah, early 60s, something like that. And I think I had the feeling that this is my last chance to have a company. And I was sort of at some level clinging to it. And hoping this year it'll be different. This season it'll be different, but it wasn't. If I'd put my head above the parapet and looked around a little bit, I might have seen what the landscape was like, but I didn't. But, and I did try to change the flavour or the structure of the years as much as I could. So when we became Method and Madness, what I did, I thought, I was always wanting to have an ensemble. And of course, at that period, this is in the 90s, the whole idea of ensembles had just vanished. That whole movement of the 60s and 70s, being a group, being an ensemble, had just dissipated totally. the Fringe was now a showcase for the West End, basically, more or less. Do you know? And so I was still clinging to the idea of an ensemble. So we did manage to do that year with 4 actors doing 4 shows, and they were good, and they were lovely actors, and the work was, you know, and with each show they got better and better, which was wonderful. And I got very excited by that, and I thought, now I'd like to have a company for 3 years. And so we planned towards that, and there was an intervening year where, and I can't remember if I told you, it was a year in which I did 2 productions, and one of them just blew up in my face. I thought everything went wrong. The actors were unhappy and wanted to be unhappy, and I couldn't solve the problem. And it was sort of torment for about 6 months or however long that. And I couldn't believe at this stage of my life that that sort of thing could happen to me. You know, it sort of happened to me in variations. And that's a very interesting thing to talk about as well. And it was my own imperceptions. Laziness, I think I got a little lazy in this company in certain ways. I don't know.
You say you were getting lazy. You presumably, because I remember early on you said you whether it's a drama school or the National Theatre, you will do all your preparatory work.
Oh yes,
lazy on that score. It's a different kind of laziness.
I got lazy about casting. I thought, well, I'll work with actors I know, or I'd meet an actor and kind of like them, and I wouldn't check if they were right. I don't know. There was a sort of. I think I got bored with the touring as well. It was tiring, and you know, and it just. I don't. I think that was certainly with this, and I can pin it down to this particular year. But anyway, the following year we raised enough money to do. Well, no, we didn't raise enough money. We started off on this 3-year project, and we said we're going to build a repertoire up of 5 or 6 plays in the 3 years, and the venues they can choose what they'd like to have. And the reaction was so totally negative. Oh, just give us one play. We don't want to have to choose. And I was told my work was too intellectual, too long, too complex. And I thought, well, I'm not an intellectual director, really. I mean, I'm intelligent, but you know, and there were no names, and you know, and so forth. And I got a very lovely company together of 10 actors who were enthusiastic, and we paid them well, and we really looked after them. And I started off doing yet another cherry orchard. I think this is my 4th cherry orchard. And I'd always, this was where my thinking was lazy. It's because I thought, we're about to go into the 20th century. It started in 1997 and it would have gone into 2000. And I thought, I'm going to choose 4 plays which sort of cover the century. The 20th century. And I thought, who's the great writer who moves into the 20th century? Chekhov, whom I love. I'll start with the Cherry Orchard. Now, I'd always believed that deep down in the Cherry Orchard, it should be a sort of clown show. That it was a comedy which was very funny and physical because of all sorts of things in the text. But still moving and poignant and meaningful. And I thought, I've got my company, I'll do that. And I didn't think very carefully because I was asking the actors who didn't know each other to do this incredibly difficult play anyway, and to do it in a very heightened style. And it didn't really quite work. It did work finally, I think, in the last few performances we toured. It sort of fell into place, but it took a long time. You know, and I started working with a new designer because Paul Dart, after the debacle with the previous year where the actors got very unhappy, they took against the set, they took against the costumes. It's a whole other subject. It's really interesting. Paul said, actually, I'm getting a bit old. I'm sick of climbing on a ladder with a staple gun. And he had another career doing street designs, you know, decorations and earning a lot of money. And so look, we'd had a very nice time and I understood totally. So I started working with another designer who was very lovely and fresh and really very, very good. Peter McDonald, oh, this is awful, isn't it? I'll look them all up. I don't know how we deal with this in terms of your stuff. Anyway, so uh, and then I thought I want to do some storytelling, and Philip will write a new play for us, and we'll do something else. I think. Oh, I I love James Elroy. I don't know if he's familiar to you. He is an exceptionally brilliant American crime writer, but he writes about the underbelly of American history, and he mixes real people with a whole series of characters which move through the things. And his language, he's inventive, he's brutal, he's funny, he's witty. I mean, he's a real artist, real writer. By chance, I picked up one of his books and just was knocked out by it. American Tabloid. I thought, oh, but that was huge. And James, bless his heart, managed to get the rights to one of his earlier novels called The Black Dahlia. And so we did that, Philip's show. And we were going to do 5 shows, and then I don't know what we were going to do finally. Anyway, so we did the Cherry Orchard. Then we came back, and I wanted to do something that moved on into the 20s and 30s, and I wanted to do some storytelling. And you probably know of him. He is a Nobel Prize winner. He's a Polish-American writer called Isaac Bashevis Singer. He was born into a very Orthodox family, and in a small town in Poland, and emigrated in the 30s to America, and always wrote in Yiddish, but became a huge, and he wrote hundreds of short stories. Wonderful, wonderful. And I put together an evening of his short stories, really, really interesting, and that was very nice work. Very nice work. But again, that material is not familiar to English audiences. I think it went okay. Okay. And then I did the James Elroy. None of this was, we were going to save everything and come into London, at the end of 3 years or something. And then in Derby Playhouse, we opened up with the James Elroy thing, which was a good production. It actually got some good reviews from London people came up, but it was a big production, very complicated. But at the same time, most of the venues we were going to were turning up their noses and saying, oh, we don't know what that is, what is that? And we were getting less and less bookings and earning less and less, and the situation was getting very tricky. And now at the same time, my wonderful James Williams, who'd been my total supporter, got headhunted by Hampstead Theatre, who were moving into a new building and wanted a new administrator. And it was more money, and he said, look, I have to go, I've got a family, and I said, James, I can't, I shall miss you terribly. But so then there was this interim period where we couldn't find anybody, and there was nobody, somebody came, that lovely woman called Nikki Pello, who'd worked for me with Shared Experience years ago, came in as a sort of caretaker on part-time, but there was never anybody there really to work with. And I was feeling exhausted. I then did Philip's play, and I didn't realize I was getting very depressed, because every day all I wanted to do was to get into bed. The happiest moment was I lay on my bed and I thought, oh. But I kept going, and luckily with Philip's play, I knew what to do. It was a very good play. The acts were lovely. They knew how to work, and it was terrific. And we almost got to the Edinburgh Festival. Then they said it's too long, it won't fit into our time slot. So that nothing happened, nothing worked for us. It was one of those things, whatever we did, nothing ever took off. It seemed like we were cursed, just one of those things, you see. And then we thought, well, we better do something popular. So to hell with this 20th century thing, I decided to do Midsummer Night's Dream. And we started working on it, and the company had to be closed down because there was no money. And in a way, I felt relieved, but at the same time guilty, because the actors had committed themselves for 3 years, and they'd got mortgages and moved into houses and all sorts of things, and we felt terribly responsible. We did the best we could for them, but it was we'd worked for about two years or something like that, And so that was a huge, and they were getting better and better. And I mean, they were starting to prove the point. If you have a group of people working together over a long period of time, they will become very, very good. And they were. And also, I have to say, in the view of what's happening in the theatre currently, it was a multi-ethnic company. It was hugely diverse. I had black actress playing Manevska. I had a, North African, half North African guy in the company. I had somebody with a long Italian. It was a real mixture of people. So, and everybody was cast. I didn't worry about shapes and sizes or colours and things like that. So my heart was in the right place and the work was good. It was good then. But we couldn't find theatres who wanted to do it. So we didn't come into London, and I suddenly thought, well, actually, I'm so tired, just let it go. But the actors, first of all, I found it annoying, but then bless them. They said, oh, we've got to put a show on, we can't. Let's bring the Dybbuk's and the Isaac Bashevis singer. That's manageable. It doesn't have a big set. Let's bring that into London. And they got a production. They found money. And they got a book, they got a space at the Young Vic, in the main house. And so I had to go and rehearse for them. And I was sort of feeling very guilty and ashamed I hadn't been enthused yet. They did it and I directed it. And it got quite nice reviews, a bit mystified. What are these stories? Because he's very odd, he's sort of vaguely mystic and strange. And I tried to structure the plays, the stories, which actually echo his life, about a very shy, naive, rather superstitious young Jewish boy with huge testicles, desperate for sex and behaving with women very badly, emigrating to America, being poor and penniless, and then become very successful. And I tried to, it was good work, and I love those stories. Anyway, that was that, and then I said, the board didn't fire me. They said, look, let's see if we can rethink this. The Arts Council thought I was a good thing. We should go on with the company. And I hadn't had a break in a long time. I said, I have to have a sabbatical. I hadn't had a break in a year more or longer. And I was tired. And I said, look, it's up to you. I've got to go away for at least 3 months or more. And that blessed them. To their fault, I suppose, in many ways. They kept me on salary, and I just got a Eurostar train, a Euro train, a Euro rail, and just wandered around Europe for 3 months, longer, and just eating, looking at the views, going for walks, reading novels, and ended up in Madrid. And thought, now I've got to start thinking about the company. Do I want it? And I remember sitting down with a little book and saying, reasons to go on with the company, reasons not to. And I couldn't see any way in which we could make our journey differently without having to go to the same theatres, I couldn't see another circuit where we could earn enough money, because I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if I could change this space that I've got, this wonderful premises, into a real laboratory where we could explore things, where we could have people from all different sort of disciplines coming in, scientists coming in and talking to us about the effect of colour on you emotionally, I don't know, anything, and just really be a workshop out of which wonderful shows would, but where would the money come from? And the Arts Council was becoming less and less generous over the years. You see, when I started with Shared Experience all those years ago in 1975, you had the right to fail, and they wanted to give you money if they could. And it just reversed. It had become bureaucratic and bums on seats and being accountable. And, So I remember seeing my fine little hotel I was staying in. I woke up that morning, having made my list, and thought, I've got to resign. I can't go on, it's stupid. And I walked out into the streets, and I felt as though a ton weight had been lifted from my shoulders. And I thought, that must be a good sign. It was right. And I came back, and there was a wonderful woman who had taken over James's job as the administrator. And of course, she'd had nothing to do for 3 months, and she was waiting for me to come back, and I felt a bit guilty. So I sat down with her, and I said, look, I think I should resign, but is there a way that we could try to create this laboratory stuff together, you see? And we thought about it, and we couldn't see any way. So I handed in my notice in 1999. I came back just in December, and I literally just, at the end of the century, I handed in my notice and woke up at the beginning of the 21st century thinking, well, anything, I was 66. What do we know? We're 2000. Yes, I was 66, and I thought, well, I can always teach. I felt very free. I felt, close one door, another door will open. I can always teach. I don't have to do productions. The world has seen enough of Mike Alfred's productions. And I felt very positive, and all sorts of interesting work fell into my play, which we can talk about another day. We can talk about that. But the sad thing about Method of Madness, that finally it wasn't viable, and the board closed it down. And I think there was understandably one or two people who had been devoted to Cambridge Theatre Company felt quite bitter about it, that I'd sort of destroyed their child, which I had in a way, I guess, with all the good intentions. So that's the story of Cambridge Theatre Company stroke Method of Madness. Interesting.
Okay. Good, Mike.
God. The trouble is, as you can understand, well, you can hear it, can't you? There's so many kind of things to talk about. Little slots and.
Well, we've only got another 20 years to go.
Easier. Anyway, my God.
All right, Mike. Well, we'll bring this one to a close, okay?
I'll stop the recording.
Well, no, and just say goodbye to me.
Goodbye, Peter. Thank you very much for being such a wonderful listener.
Talk again. See ya. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed that chat. And if you did, would you press the like button and also the subscribe button? That would be great. And if you wanted to be given alerts to when the next one is happening, just press the bell button. If you want to put any comments or any questions underneath here, underneath the video, please do. And at some point I will re-interview Mike, as it were, and put some of these questions to him. So I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.